to New York or LA. She loved her home and her family and, for her, believed in staying where she'd been put. But she had little care for people who were overly comfortable or lacked ambition. A person could stay in the place they called home and still make something of it. She also had never wanted to trade on her family notoriety, even as she knew people paid attention to the name Wayne in this part of the country. Admittedly, it was hard to ignore or hide, since her brother Zach had more than doubled the size of Wayne & Sons' output since taking over the management of the ranch from their father. And their family name recognition had only gone global as Zach's wife Hadley became a major cooking network celebrity. But it didn't mean Charlotte didn't want to make something of herself all on her own. Merrill excused himself, leaving her and Tom alone at the table. The younger man had been respectful, but Charlotte hadn't missed the appreciative gaze in his eyes or his overly touchy demeanor. He'd already laid a hand on her lower back as they'd walked to their seats, a move she'd deliberately shaken off by beelining toward another table to say hello to her parents' friends, and then he'd brushed his fingers over hers as he'd taken her menu to hand it to their waitress. "How long are you staying in Bozeman?" "I head home first thing tomorrow. I have an early meeting I need to get back for." "But you're here this evening. Maybe we can go get a nightcap after we finish dinner." "Thank you for the offer, but I'm not going to be able to." His smile dimmed, but he pressed on. "It's one drink, Charlotte." She kept her voice steady but pumped the slightest bit of steel under her even tone. "I believe I said I wasn't able to join you." "And if Dad and I were signing on the dotted line of your damn proposal, how would you feel then?" It wasn't the first time she'd been propositioned, and, tiring though it may be, she recognized the eternal dance behind modern dating. Tom was single and unattached, and the dating pool in this part of the country wasn't huge. She didn't blame him for taking a shot. But she sure as hell blamed him for thinking she'd prostitute herself on the altar of her business. "You've made it perfectly clear you don't care one goddamn for my work or my efforts to improve your business. And that's entirely within your right." She lifted a hand and made the universal gesture for the check to their waitress. "I won't, however, sit here and be called a whore." "That's not what I meant." Tom looked about to argue further when his father wove his way back to the table. Merrill arrived just as the waitress did, and Charlotte already had her credit card out, handing it over without looking at the check, adding one final instruction. "Please add one more round of drinks for these lovely gentlemen. I'm the one who has to end our evening early." When Tom remained sullen and his father looked about to protest, Charlotte added, "Merrill, I apologize for my abrupt departure, but I'm afraid I need to head out. You've both been so kind to give me so much of your time, but I need to prepare for a meeting tomorrow, as well as the early drive back to Rustlers Creek." As excuses went, it was one of the types she hated, pandering to her elders to get what she wanted. At the same time, the world was small, and she couldn't afford to go around pissing off the very people her business depended upon, especially because she couldn't afford to alienate any of them. "I do appreciate your time, and if you have a chance to think about what I said, I'd love to review my proposal with you should your perspective change." She signed the check with a flourish, pleased when the waitress had sensed the mood shift and already arrived with the next round of drinks. "You enjoy the rest of the evening." The men stood in unison as she got up, Tom offering a sullen thank you for the dinner and Merrill sending his best to her parents. And in moments, Charlotte was breathing the fresh fall air as she trekked across the parking lot toward the hotel she favored when she stayed in Bozeman, and refused to let a single frustrated tear slip over her cheeks. Chance Beaumont hadn't meant to eavesdrop from his perch at the end of the bar, or sight drop, as it were, since he couldn't hear what was being said. But as he'd watched the tableau play out across the restaurant, off and on as he ate his meal, he had a pretty damn good idea of what had happened. The fact that he had a difficult time tearing his gaze off of Charlotte Wayne under the best of circumstances had little to do with his observations. He normally couldn't keep his gaze from wandering to her, but it had been a marvel to have an opportunity to do it with little fear of getting caught. The two of them had managed a low-level sort of animosity since grade school. It was a state that, while initially his fault, had morphed into a sort of Olympic sport of sheer stubborn will. They'd go months at